looked so scared. And Chris was passed out. What did you do to him?
He attempted to escape and was taught a painful lesson. It is time for the experiment. These two Metarex were designed by me especially for this occasion. Gold will test your strength, and silver, your speed. I based my Metarex designs on data that was collected during previous battles against you. I'm eager to see if they're powerful enough to defeat you.
Alright then, let's test them out! Looks like you'll have to go back to the drawing board!
If you've been a Sonic fan since the 2000s, you likely remember Dark Sonic, one of the most popular transformations within the entire Sonic franchise. Ever since the form made its debut in episode 67 of Sonic X, most Sonic fans had their minds blown away by this dark and ominous take on our favorite blue blur. In fact, this is one of the moments from Sonic X that's still talked about to this day, as there's over dozens of fan media that feature this transformation, as well as people still fawning over the episode it came from. However, despite the love Dark Sonic has, it seems some fans of the franchise have started to question its popularity over the years. See, for context, I recently made a poll on YouTube asking you guys which dark transformation of Sonic you thought was the best, and unsurprisingly to some people, Dark Sonic won the most votes. However, some people in the comments of that poll did express their dislike of the form as well as confusion for how it won, considering that it only appeared one time in the series and hardly had any screen time in Sonic X. This led some people to believe that this form is only liked for its aura moment and its hypothetical potential it could have had if it was brought back again, which sparked some debates. On top of that, some people in retrospect find this form to be a bit odd and random, enough to the point where some will go as far as saying that this moment doesn't really fit Sonic's character, which got me thinking. Is Dark Sonic actually an overhyped transformation that should stay as a one-off in Sonic X, or is there actually more to this form than what most people realize? Well, without further ado, let's dive into this discussion. To give you a little bit of background behind Dark Sonic, in Sonic X he stated to be a rage transformation, that whenever Sonic gets really angry, this is the form he would become in response towards it. For context, after breaking into the Metarex's base to find Chris and Cosmo, Sonic first notices the fake emeralds around him that were created by the Metarexes to supply their world with infinite energy, which makes him start feeling a little bit queasy from their aura. And yes, before anyone asks, these emeralds are similar to the fake emerald that Tails made in SA2, which tried to mimic the properties of a real Chaos Emerald, which means it is possible to utilize Chaos powers with them. Back to the scene. Immediately after crash landing, Black Narcissus invites Sonic on the floor above him to speak with him. After a bit of back and forth, Sonic impatiently asks for his friends back, only for Black Narcissus to show them trapped in a small prison, and inside of it, Sonic could see an incapacitated Chris and was warned that if he tried to break them out, that the pressure could vaporize his friends, which sets him on edge, enough to where an ominous black aura slowly started to form around him as he worried for his friends. Black Narcissus then sends Metarex Gold and Silver to test Sonic's strength and speed for his experiment, and moments before the climax, Sonic begins twitching a bit while slowly turning his head back with an ominous grin on his face accepting the challenge, and completely destroys both enemies effortlessly. We're then left with Sonic standing menacingly in the smoke of his enemies, not entertained with the fight, his form now more ominous than before to where it almost looks exactly like Super Sonic with a darker shade, a less optimistic personality, and soulless eyes. At least that's how he was until Eggman intervened and calmed Sonic down. And that's it. No, seriously, we never see this form again after this moment unless I start bringing up some Sonic fanfics that feature it, which, for your safety and my safety, I will not be doing. This brings us to the first problem some people have with the form. It's screen time. It has at the bare minimum of around 30 seconds of actual screen time, and that's counting the moments where we get to see Dark Sonic's face. At this point, he's making Tenten from Naruto look like an actual relevant character in that story. Okay, maybe that was a little bit too far. The point is, this does make the hype behind the form a little bit questionable considering we don't have enough info to understand what makes this form more unique than the others. Now don't get me wrong, there have been plenty of other one-off transformations within the franchise, both canon and non-canon, but at the very least those forms did have a healthy amount of screen time to warrant the hype behind them, whether it's being used inside of a final boss or to expand a little bit on the Sonic lore. Dark Sonic in both of those regards kind of fails to fulfill either of those roles. He doesn't have much screen time to make his action scenes stand out, and he doesn't really add anything to the story other than being what's essentially an emo version of Super Sonic. At most, you could argue that he showcases a possible what-if scenario for when Sonic absorbs the negative energy of the Chaos Emeralds, but I would argue that Fleetway Super Sonic does a better job at representing that despite how ugly bro looks. I'm not sorry, by the way, but hey, just because a transformation doesn't have that much screen time doesn't undermine its writing, right? I mean, this form was introduced in the Meta-Rex arc, which most Sonic fans agree is one of the best written stories in the entire franchise, so surely the writing for Dark Sonic must be a masterpiece, right? Nah, not really. Okay, now it's time to get to the actual meat of the conversation that has Sonic fans mixed on this form, and that's how it was written. Now before we dabble on that subject, I think it's important that we understand the concept behind a dark transformation within a story. Typically, a dark transformation for a character, usually found within superhero media, is used as a narrative tool to set up key moments for a character arc throughout the story. It pretty much takes most of the negative character traits that the character in question already has but cranks it up by 10 to where everyone can see it personified. This is done to highlight to the audience where the character's mental state is currently at in the story, either as a response to something tragic that happened in the narrative or because they're starting to question themselves. It's for this reason, this narrative tool is typically used for characters, usually younger protagonists, who are still developing in the story to bring them down to earth and make them come off as more relatable to the audience who may share the same flaws as them. For example, it makes sense for Mark to go through his blue suit phase in Invincible considering the tragedy he had experienced in the story up to that point, which caused him to become more mentally exhausted, on top of him constantly walking the fine line between his ideology of heroism and Omni-Man's ideology of being Earth's guardian. It also makes sense that Izuku Midoriya in My Hero Academia went through his vigilante or Dark Deku phase since he believed he was a walking target for his enemies to come get him, and wanted to go rogue to protect his loved ones from getting hurt, on top of the events in the story making him question what it truly means to be a hero. Heck, Spider-Man is a classic example of this since he would constantly rely on the symbiote suit and even let it influence his actions since he thought he wasn't strong enough without it. And keep in mind that Peter Parker during these moments was still deciding if Spider-Man was the pure-hearted hero of New York or the person that was made specifically to kill Uncle Ben's killer and anyone else who harmed him and his loved ones. This adds on to the development of these characters so that they can learn from these experiences and eventually understand the type of person they want to be, and in some cases, make them a better character by the end of the story that the audience can relate towards. This is why some Sonic fans nowadays may find it weird for Sonic to have a transformation like this. It's not so much that Dark Sonic isn't a cool form, it's more so the fact that Sonic's character doesn't really warrant it. For one, unlike the characters I mentioned earlier, Sonic is already a fully developed character in the franchise. He already understands who he is, has his priorities straight, and carries an unwavering ideology. Heck, don't just take it from me, take it from almost any video game cutscene or theme song that features this blue blur, and each of them pretty much personify that Sonic already knows who he is and doesn't really need any character development.
I'm just living by my own feelings, and I won't give in, won't compromise. I just only have a steadfast heart of gold. I don't know why I can't leave, though it might be tough, but I ain't out of control, just living by my word. We can make it and we all stay together. We won't give up, not ever, and everything's gonna be alright.
At most, you could argue that Sonic during the classic era didn't fully understand who he was or who he wanted to be yet, but that's just speculation. And either way, he still carried the same persona that his modern self carries to this day. Or, at the very least, tries to carry. On top of that, Sonic has been in a lot of very tense situations before, and even arguably worse situations after this moment in Sonic X, and he never really once wavered in any of those moments and remained who he is at heart. I mean, this is the same character that's been held in prison for months, targeted by law enforcers, and even has been chased by characters who are trying to straight up murder him, and yet he still treats these moments as if it was yet another adventure. Besides, Sonic already has some dark transformations, some that are actually canon to the main storyline like Darkspine Sonic and the Werehog, and despite them being dark forms, Sonic's persona never once wavered while in either of them, and he kept the same priorities he had prior to transforming into them. Granted, he comes off as more aggressive in his tone to some people, but it's not to the point where Sonic feels like an entirely different character like other dark forms in media. So Sonic becoming really angry here to where he transforms into this dark and ominous form and almost loses control of himself just feels completely out of character for him to do. And I don't just mean video game Sonic, I'm also referring to Sonic X Sonic as well. Mind you that X Sonic has been in several situations where he has gotten the absolute being out of him to the point where he's suffering from the Vegeta treatment and holding his left arm, and he still manages to keep his cool in these situations. Why? Because he's a Sonic hero. And also because that's just how he naturally is. But what about Chris? After all, Sonic seeing him collapse in the Meta-Rex's prison is the real reason he crashed out and turned into Dark Sonic. Well, keep in mind that X Sonic has already been in situations where he has witnessed Chris getting hurt or being left incapacitated or injured by the enemy, and in those situations, his response wasn't to immediately get angry and completely crash out, it was to calmly handle the threat before tending to his friend. So even in terms of talking purely about Sonic X, this Dark Sonic moment still comes off as an out-of-character moment for Sonic to the point where it kind of feels like a retcon. Which would kind of make sense considering that the Meta-Rex saga in general was not originally planned for the series, so it's possible the writers intentionally altered Sonic's character here just to give us Dark Sonic. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, of course, it's just something that I thought I'd point out. And before people rush to the comments section to tell me it's the fake Meta-Rex Chaos symbols that's causing this transformation, while they may play a part in it, it's heavily implied in the show by Eggman that Sonic's anger in this moment is what caused this transformation to happen, evident by him telling Sonic to calm down. Speaking of which, out of all the characters they could have chosen to calm Sonic down, they chose Eggman? The same person who has put this hedgehog and his friends in life or death situations multiple times, not just in the games, but also in this very show? Bro was lucky that Sonic didn't punch the hell out of him while he was angry, especially while he was trying to degrade him for it. Look, I get that they made a temporary alliance to take down the Meta-Rex, but Eggman and Sonic don't really have a buddy-to-buddy relationship like that. At least, a healthy one. Unless these two were secretly off somewhere sharing their chili dogs with one another, Eggman is the last person I'd expect to lecture him about losing his temper, something that Sonic never really had a problem controlling. And that's the reason why I feel like some fans don't understand the hype behind Dark Sonic. Alright then, so what do people see in this transformation? I mean, from what I described to you so far, it sounds like Dark Sonic is only liked for being the potential man of Sonic's transformations. Now, I'm not gonna lie with you, he obviously is, but personally I don't think people only like Dark Sonic for this reason. I think the reason why so many people gravitated towards this moment in Sonic X is because of how relatable it is. Like I said earlier in the video, the whole point of a dark transformation is to further humanize a character, to remind people that their favorite character is not always going to be optimistic, and in hard times will react negatively to situations when things become too tough for them. Even if you could argue that Dark Sonic was random and his writing actively goes against Sonic's characterization up to this point, this was still one of the only times he has gone really mad to where he almost lost control of himself, which in turn brings Sonic a bit down to earth seeing him losing his temper like that. We don't see this often in the franchise. That, and at least this does show us that Sonic not getting angry is also a good thing, otherwise he likely would have made sure his friends no longer had a home to go towards. So I can see why he always tries to keep his emotions in check, especially when he's around Chaos Emeralds. So at the very least, I can see the appeal behind this dark form in particular, even if it had about a half a minute of screen time. This still leaves us with a very important question, however. If Sega were to return back to the concept of Dark Sonic, could he fit within the main storyline? Well, I definitely don't think they could bring him into the video game storyline in a meaningful way that doesn't harm Sonic's characterization or make the form look weird, because like I said earlier, Sonic is already a fully developed character. At least in the games. Now this may sound like an absurd take, but I do think there's room for the form to fit within the Sonic movie verse, since Sonic in that universe is not fully developed yet and does show signs of having a wavering ideology. This is especially true if we look at Sonic Movie 3, since, spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't seen Sonic Movie 3 yet, but when Shadow injured Tom, Sonic's human best friend in that movie, Sonic quickly changed from a hyper-teen personality to a cold, angered, and worried personality, enough to where he didn't even trust his friends to help him stop Shadow, and purely fought Shadow out of vengeance for Tom, which is almost similar to what Shadow's ideology was behind why he wanted to destroy the Earth, to avenge Maria. And since Sonic is still a developing character in the movie universe with a wavering ideology, I honestly don't think it would feel weird or out of place for Dark Sonic to be featured in a film as long as the writers are creative with how they introduce the form, and it could be used to expand more on movie Sonic's character development. Who knows, perhaps if the upcoming Sonic 4 movie or in any future Sonic films, if they choose to dive deeper and explain the concept behind the positive and negative energies of the Chaos Emeralds to the audience, this could be the way how they could expand on that lore info, at least without having the team having to kill their whole budget just animating Chaos into the film just to showcase the negative energy in the Emeralds. It's okay, Chaos. One day you'll be added into a Sonic film. Hopefully. With all that being said, do I think that Dark Sonic in general is an overhyped Sonic transformation? Yeah, but I wouldn't say that I don't like it. This is still, in my opinion, one of the best moments in Sonic X. The concept of Sonic having a dark parallel to Super Sonic is interesting, and I do think that the design of it is pretty cool, so I get why people continue to talk about it and wish Sega brought it back in future Sonic media. But it's pretty clear that the writers didn't have a clear direction with what they wanted to do with Dark Sonic, which is why it had a small fraction of screen time, and its introduction in the show kinda felt random and inconsistent. If Sega ever plans to return to this concept, I really do hope they rewrite it in a more interesting and meaningful way that further expands on the idea so that it feels more fleshed out, and more importantly, gives the form more screen time. But until something like that happens, potential is really all Dark Sonic will ever be. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. I feel like I wanted to do more videos centered around the polls I make on this channel, so let me know if I should consider making more of them. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to keep up with future content. And also, feel free to share your thoughts on Dark Sonic down below in the comments and if you think Sega should bring this form back. Other than that, it's been Mr. Boomer reminding you all to stay fresh.